Morena Church. It's good to be with my church family today. These words from 1 Corinthians 13, they're really familiar words to us, aren't they? We often will place them in the wall of a living room or some place that we might have. And again, just reiterate that love is patient and kind. It bears all things. It never ends. We love hearing these words. And the whole concept of love never ends. It gives us kind of a sense of a warm smile and kind of this emotional hug as we kind of think about it, because we love hearing things like this. And yet, at the same time, there's an unfamiliarity about them. So even though we place them in front of us and many of us would kind of be able to memorize them, that they're not really on the walls of our heart. And though we love the words that come from the page of Scripture, we seem to stutter when it comes to actually living these out in our lives, right? And much of that is because there's a very different understanding of love that's going on in our wider culture. If you were here last week, I mentioned about Barbara Friedrichsen. She's the professor of psychology at the University of North Carolina. And she wrote this book called Love 2.0. And she radically defines love in ways very different to what the Apostle Paul has to say in 1 Corinthians 13. So she says things like, love is not exclusive. Love's time scale is far shorter than we typically think. It has a limit. Love, as you see, is not lasting. It's not unconditional. Now, this is a polar opposite to what Paul is saying in 1 Corinthians 13. And she goes on, love is that micro moment of warmth and connection that you share with another living being. And part of me, when I read that, I kind of like it because it has that kind of warm hug type feel to it, doesn't it? There's emotion. It's a momentary state. Elsewhere in the book, she goes on and talks about it as being, a quote, a positivity resonance. This positive feeling that we have towards others. Purely an emotional connection, but it's limited. And that's why now people can fall just as easily out of love as they so easily fell into love. And while most people don't speak about love as bluntly as she does, I think this is the understanding of love we see prominently in our society. It comes through in our movies, it comes through in our books, it comes through in the songs that we listen to, and it comes through in our understanding of love towards each other. You see, this is why Paul's words, they might be familiar to us, and yet they're so unfamiliar to us. Because what Paul says is actually quite strange to our ears. It's unusual, it's unexpected, because it's polar opposites of what we see happening around us. And it was just as unexpected to the original recipients. You see, Paul penned these words to a church here in Corinth. He had lived in Corinth for about 18 months while he was serving in the church there. And then when he went across to Ephesus, he heard that the church here was having some problems. And so he writes this letter to them to try to address some of the problems that they were having. And ironically, Corinth was famous as a love city. If you were here last week, I mentioned this is where the temple of Aphrodite was housed, and Aphrodite is the goddess of love. So Corinth was renowned, famous for being the city of love. And yet when Paul writes to the church there, he's writing to them because he's hearing about all this kind of conflict that's happening. There's divisions about theology. There's differences about ways that they're meant to be doing things in church. Differences about social class and spiritual gifts. Some people are saying, my leader's better than you, my preacher's better than you, this spiritual gift is better than your one, the way I experience God is better than the way you experience God. And it's all this like rife, just happening. And right in the middle of this discussion about spiritual gifts, Paul talks about love. Again, the irony is these people thought they knew everything about love. And he writes about love not because he's suddenly gone off on this tangent to make us feel a positive resonance of some kind. He's writing about love because he knows this has everything to do with what's needed to deal with the conflicts that we face in our homes, the challenges we face in our places of work and study, and the difficulties we can even experience in church life together. Paul's first point that I mentioned last week is that love is supreme. There is nothing I need more in my life than more of the love of Jesus. Without it, I can have the best abilities, the best gifts, the best personality, the best, you name it. But it all adds up to nada, nothing without love. So Paul writes things like this. He says, if I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, that would be an amazing feat. But I didn't love others, I would be only a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And so that's why I had my beautiful gong here last week. I love my gong. And I was kind of, somewhat surprised that none of you had ever been to a gong concert of that solo gong player. And none of you, as far as I'm aware, bought the album of all the gong playing or got that T-shirt, wore it proudly with the gong player on it, with this kind of, whatever you call that dinger that they kind of hit the gong with, I've never been to a gong concert, so I would never know. But, a gong is just noise. And that's what Paul's whole point is here. You can do like all these amazing feats. You could be the most talented person on the planet. But if you don't have love, you're just making noise. You're not making music. And if you want to be part of changing lives and investing in lives for all eternity, it's done by actions infused with love. Now I realize that some of you aren't musicians, so I thought I would use a maths analogy to maybe help reinforce Paul's point. So to all you maths people out here, if you can help me out, what's this digit here? Sorry, fuel. I thought this was a pretty basic question. It's not quite like calculus or anything right yet. It's kind of pretty basic math, so 0. What about if I do this? How much does this add up to? Still, so we do pretty well in maths. And if I kind of add another 0, it's still 0. This is pretty easy maths, isn't it? And I wonder if this is how, if we kind of think about these as activities that we're associated with, that we could fill this page with 0 after 0 after 0 after 0, reflective of all the activities we can be a part of, the skills we have, the abilities that we have, but it all adds up to what? 0. This is Paul's point. But he said, the thing is, if you just let's just take even one activity and you add just one digit in front of that, it now counts for something, doesn't it? It's just like a small little thing, but this is what love is like. It suddenly adds value to what you're doing. It counts for something. It counts to people. It counts to God. And it suddenly is 10, and it's 100, and it's 1,000, and it's 10,000, and it's whatever this is, when you add a 1 to it. Just an activity. Something done now by love, it changes the whole value equation from 0 to actually something that now counts with Jesus and counts with communities. See, friends, this is why this series is so important. Because there is nothing I need more in my life than more of the love of Jesus. And we need to ensure that real love is part of all the activities that we're associated with. So how are you going with the love habits? I've heard some pretty powerful stories this past week that I wasn't actually expecting, to be honest, at least this early. But there are redemptive stories happening in homes and in places of work, all flowing from the different unexpected activities you're doing in neighborhoods and places of work and things like that all around you. And it's happening because there is real power in unexpected love. So this love takes work, though, doesn't it? I have never heard of somebody no one ever talks about falling into debt, falling into sobriety. Yes, they do, don't they? No one ever talks about falling out of debt, falling out of sobriety, or falling out of shape. They say things instead like getting out of shape, don't they? Getting sober, getting into shape. And they use the word getting because there's some activities we need to do. There's some habits and decisions we need to make. So there's some new habits that are formed in our lives because these things don't happen naturally to us. And that's true of these love habits that we're looking at in 1 Corinthians 15. I love this quote from the Azura tribe in PNG. They say, knowledge is only a rumor until it lives in a muscle. Knowledge of love, we could even quote 1 Corinthians 13, but it's all just a rumor until it starts to live in us. Until these 15 love habits start to get under our skin and in our muscles and actually in the activities that we're associated with in life. So that's why we have this exercise. So last week I gave you a postcard about love. You can pick up one in the foyer. And I said, I want us to conduct some exercises every day. So every morning when you wake up, first of all, you choose one of those 15 love habits that I mentioned here in 1 Corinthians 13. So let's say that love is unselfish. And then you think, okay, what person can I love in an unselfish way today? And you think about, it might be a spouse or a colleague, or it might be a complete stranger, or it might be a neighbor. And then you make a plan of how you're going to show that unselfish love to that person somewhere throughout the day. And so on Monday, you might think about how you might listen to a specific colleague at work throughout the day, because love is, focusing on other people. You kind of get the idea. And I encourage us to place a postcard in a prominent spot, because it's really easy, isn't it, to for things like this, we have intentions to do them, really good intentions, but somewhere we all have a little cupboard in our house with a pile of good intentions that we never got round to doing. And so my encouragement to you was to find a prominent spot to place this postcard to remind you to do it. So mine is right here by the coffee machine. So in the morning when I wake up and I grab my coffee, I have to choose not to do this rather than being reminded to do this. You right? And so, Monday I go, this is who I want to love today, this is the activity, this is my plan, and I kind of get into it. I have one next to the toothbrush in the ensuite to remind me at night, how did I do today? What was that like? Some of you check your phone like 1,000 times a day, whatever the figure would be. And so you could, sellotape this to your phone, or instead, we have some wallpaper for you. Now, I realize as soon as you change the wallpaper on your phone, as I mentioned last week, it changes the picture. So you might have a picture of your boyfriend or girlfriend or children or grandchildren, or as one of our young adults showed me, a picture of me. And you might not want to like change that, but he was really kind of greasy at the time, wasn't he? But you might not want to change that, but these are the people you want to love. So we have some wallpaper you can download and place that in front of you to remind you to step into this. Because love is supreme. We want to get this under our skin and not just to leave it as a rumor in our lives. Now, that's all a bit of a recap, because I realize some of you weren't here last week. I want us to be all on the same page. So now I want us to look at 5 of these 15 love habits. And they largely tie together. I like calling these 5 the tight 5, because they make a similar point. Love does not, say it, envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It does not demand its own way. And so this is the tight 5. And I think if Paul was here, he would be saying something to us like, you might say that you're a loving person, but if you're always demanding your own way at that meeting, if you're always demanding your own way across the kitchen bench, and you're not listening, well, you have some work to do when it comes to love. And we can stop elbowing the person next to us, right? So let's kind of break these down. Love does not envy. So what's envy? Well, envy is the pain we feel when someone else does well. And rather than rejoicing with those who rejoice, envy has this dissatisfaction at the success and the prosperity of others. It's not so much of a desire to want what they have, that would be coveting. Instead, envy is this desire to see others lose what they have. We get upset when other people rise or get promoted or receive some specific honor. In fact, Paul highlights how the Corinthians were guilty of this envy. Back in chapter 3 of this very letter, Paul accuses many in the church for their envy and their strife. the way they fostered the spirit of competition amidst the spiritual gifts that were different to their own. Instead of rejoicing at the way God was involved in someone else's life and the experiences they were having, they would criticize people that weren't experiencing it quite like them or had different experiences from God, different gifts and accomplishments. And Paul says, got to stop this. A great many people who don't fall into other kinds of sins often fall victims to envy. And the things we envy are often quite trivial. Have you noticed this? Your flatmate gets a brand new computer, she opens it up, and her assignments are kind of like just done for her automatically. And you've got something that resembles more like this old typewriter from 50 years ago. And pretty soon, you're envying her. You want what she has, or actually, you don't want her to have what she has. Or you're in an office and somebody else has a much better office than you do. Theirs has this view of the outside. Yours is like a prison cell to you. And envy starts to seize on the differences. And it looks at those differences and that's all it sees. And it starts to eat at your soul. It starts to eat at your spirit. You see, real love looks at that person as somebody made in the image of God, somebody that God loves and that you can love too. Rather than just seeing the computer or the office or the differences, it looks at this person and you love them and you're so glad they have whatever it is that they have. Love doesn't envy. And if you live before God, you believe that God has given you everything that you need. And everything you are is who He wants you to be. And it's the same for other people too. And you find there is no reason for envy. Love does not envy. Neither does love boast. Love does not boast. If envy is the feeling we have from somebody who has, a person who has supposedly lesser gifts, boasting is what somebody does who has more apparent gifts. You kind of get the difference? Boasting is saying we're richer or we're smarter or we're more gifted or more experienced than somebody else. Boasting puts us in competition with each other rather than in community with each other. But if you live before God and accept what He's given you, and you do just that, you can actually live without boasting. So many of us have this kind of PR agent inside of us, don't we? Publicizing our own image all the time. Again, the Corinthians were guilty of this too. Earlier in the letter, Paul says that some of them were boasting about their superior wisdom and superior knowledge. They would brag because they thought themselves as more spiritual than some other of their fellow church members. And they started to parade their experience of God as better than somebody else's experience of God because it made them look better. They had this inflated sense of their own importance. And Paul says the root of their problem is not about their experiences with God, it's about their lack of real love. Because love does not boast. This is the third one. Love does not, say it, dishonor others. Love does not dishonor others. The word for dishonor is translated rudeness. It's that shocking way other people can be treated when we think that we are better than they are. And so we have this knack, don't we, of treating some people with preferential treatment, and other people it's like we turn our back on them and there's this rudeness that comes in. Earlier in the letter, Paul notes how this happened in the church of Corinth. It says there were some wealthy people in the church who would come together for this love feast, it was called. It was for the whole church to come to, but the wealthy would get in first and they would eat all the food before the poor people would come. You see, the poor people couldn't get off their jobs earlier. They had to stay till kind of the bell had kind of gone, and then they would arrive, and these wealthy people had eaten everything. And I guess in the minds of the wealthy, it was like, well, most of the food here we've kind of provided anyway. But Paul's going, no, this is actually rude. And you call this love feast, but real love isn't rude. Real love doesn't exclude people from your community. That's dishonoring to other members. And Paul says it betrays the real problem, which is this absence of love. Because real love in somebody's life means that they're the first person to walk across the room and welcome somebody who's different to them. Provides hospitality to rich and poor alike. Even people who are different to them, speak different languages to them, have different color skin or postcodes or whatever it is today. Love does not dishonor others. In addition, Paul says, love does not demand its own way. Love does not demand its own way. It's almost like we live in a culture now when we're told to start demanding our own way. You notice this? I mean, aren't we told to speak up, to raise your voice, to demand your own way? It's almost like we've kind of gone the opposite now and we push our opinion loudly in the meeting or around the kitchen bench or wherever we are, and we don't listen. Now, obviously, we need to speak up and talk, but we need to listen and not always have to be right. It's like this new norm in how we spend time on ourselves, the self-time we talk about. And this need for more and more self-time is actually eroding volunteerism and the servant-heartedness that used to exist a generation or so ago. It's the same with giving, with generosity. We've got so used to spending time on ourselves for personal pleasure rather than generously giving it to make a difference in the lives of others. And the root is something that's ultimately at the core of our own lives, is this inability to love. See, love says, will I let somebody else speak? Love says, will I shut up and listen? Do I always have to be right? Do I always have to win? Do I have to make other people lose? It's incredibly practical, isn't it? I mean, also really uncomfortable for us because we all have a long way to go with this. But this is what real love looks like in home, work, in our neighborhoods. And then Paul makes a fifth aspect about love. He says, love is not proud. Love is not proud. I love the old translation of the King James Version, where it really captures the meaning of pride with the Greek word here. It says, love does not puff up. Love does not puff up. And the idea is this kind of inflated sense of self. So I'd like to illustrate this. I think, John, if we can grab our image of an ego back here. Thank you. Can we give John, the beautiful John, a hand today? Thank you. And so let's say this is our ego. And so Paul's idea is that, it's pumped up, it's overinflated, it's ready to burst. And this ego is somehow, kind of inside of us, or sometimes, here in our head. And it's obviously painful to us because it's inflated beyond what it should be. It just has too much air in it. But actually, if we're honest, while this is a large ego, there's probably some larger egos around. John, do you have like a bigger balloon maybe back there? Or maybe, thank you. This might be kind of more what we need. Thank you. So this one here might be kind of more of what Paul has in mind, isn't it? This idea of an inflated ego, a lot of air that's somehow captured in our lives somehow, right? But if we're honest, actually this one's probably still too small for some of the egos in us too, isn't it? So I don't know if you can actually get a bigger balloon than this one. Do we have a bigger one, John? You find a bigger one back there? Here we go. Thank you. So maybe some of our egos might be more like this one. It's pretty big. It just has a lot of air that's kind of been, blown in, this kind of inflated sense of one's own importance. It's ego, swollen, inflated, extended past its proper size. And Paul says this is exactly what pride looks like. But the weird part about pride is that it can actually hide itself from the person who wears it, which is kind of weird because it's so inflated, but somehow it hides itself in our life. It's quite easy to spot in the lives of others. I mean, how could you not see it? Ironically, though, it's actually quite hard to see in ourselves. One pastor put it this way. He said, you look at the kind of other sins around us. You know when somebody's embezzling somebody. It's not like you wake up and go, how did I get $750,000 into my bank account? You mean I don't earn that every year? You kind of know when you've stolen from someone. You also know when you're committing adultery. It's black and white. You never wake up and say, oh my gosh, you're not my wife. You kind of know it. It's in black and white. Pride is quite different, isn't it? This inflated ego has the ability to hide, but it shows up in the demands that we make. It shows up when we expect certain things, different entitlements for ourselves. It shows up in our refusal to do things deemed beneath us. And it's harmful. It's harmful to others. It's obviously very harmful to ourselves. It's like the carbon monoxide of sin. You can't smell it. It's odorless, but it kills you without having any ability for you to know what's happening. Many people have pointed out that pride has two forms. One is the superiority form of pride. This is the one we're most familiar with. So let me stay with our maths analogy for a bit. So you might remember from maths this greater than symbol. So what pride does, it says, well, okay, let's say I'm over here. It's like my drawing. And I'm bigger than this person over here. And it starts to look at particular aspects of that to show that I'm greater than this person. It might be I'm bigger than them and they're smaller than me. So I'm obviously superior. My ego, therefore, is much bigger and more inflated. It might be a particular trait. It might be that I have more muscles than this person. It might be that I'm better looking than this person. It might be that I have more money than this person. It might be that I can think better thoughts than them and have these wonderful, it's meant to be a light bulb, I'm smarter than them. I mean, there's a whole lot of calculations we use, isn't it, to think about how much greater I am than them. And so my ego gets inflated and I profile that in my PR campaign. We're kind of used to that superiority form of pride. But there's another type of pride that we often don't talk about as much because we don't see it as pride, even though this is the way the Bible talks about it. And that's kind of the inferiority form of pride. You see, this person, even though they're smaller than this person, can also have a large ego in the sense that it's all about them. Even though they're looking at this person and they're smaller, they're effectively using the same calculation. They still notice things and it comes back to them. So I'm smaller than this person and they feel it in their ego. Or I don't have as much money as this person and again, it's still about me and what I don't have. Or I don't look as good as this person and we start to worry about what we look like as we stare in the mirror at ourselves day in, day out. But it's still about my ego. Or I'm not as smart as they are. I don't have all the degrees they have. Or I don't have this title or position or office. And we feel it. It's this inferiority form of pride. And it's often misunderstood. See, C.S. Lewis in his book, Mere Christianity, it's a brilliant book and this brilliant observation. At the very end of his chapter on pride, Lewis says, if you were going to meet a truly humble person, you would probably walk away from the meeting not actually realizing how humble that person really is. They wouldn't always be telling us that they're a nobody, that they're really small, that they don't have any muscles, that they're the worst looking person in the room. They won't be saying anything like that. Obviously, they won't be gloating about things either. But the thing you remember about the most humble person that you ever meet is how it seemed like they were totally interested in you. It's like the spotlight was just on you in that meeting. It wasn't about them. It wasn't all the stories of their accomplishments or how good or bad they were. It was just, you felt really loved. You felt incredibly important. They were just asking about you and unpacking things in your life. You see, this is the way the Bible understands the opposite of pride, humility. and it's at the heart of love. It's not absorbed about your own life and about your own feelings. Whatever side of the equation, the calculation you're on, you're actually thinking about yourself less. You're actually moving to show interest in the life of another, to put the focus on the conversation on them, and to assure they have your full focus of attention. This is what Paul's talking about when he talks about love. See, again, just go back to the 5. Love does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It does not demand its own way. See, friends, this is completely opposite to how we hear of love in our wider society. In fact, the picture of love we often have comes from this idea that the Greeks would talk about using the word eros. Eros is graphically put together here. This is actually eros, the Greek icon. We often have some different images, with Cupid with his arrow is often the way it's called today too, but it's eros. And there's a sense where eros today almost like even turns people on as they think about love, because it's quite possessive. It goes out and hunts for its prey and brings them in, and we almost like that sense of love conquering somebody. This is often how we understand love. And it's all about me. It's about my ego. I am the focus of attention. It's about my feelings and what I get from this other person. It's a love that hunts its prey. What's in it for me is the main question. It's about what I feel, about what I want, not what others need. So when I don't feel something, or when I'm not getting the attention that I want, I leave to get that from somebody else or from some other place. That's why relationships often fall apart, because I'm not getting what I need from someone else. This is how our society understands love. And it hurts friendships, it hurts relationships, it hurts children. It cultivates a toxic nature to every home and workplace. But when we define love as a positivity resonance, all it does is puts me in the center. It makes everybody else pray, wanting what I want. It never builds community. Love, that kind of love, kills community. Paul uses a different word. He uses this word agape, and he brings new meaning to it. And that's why he writes down these 15 different love habits to show, not just in some definition that we would never understand, but to show us what real love looks like in practice. And if you were going to sum up these 5 of the 15 we've looked at today, it's real love is unselfish. That the focus of attention is not on me. The focus of attention is on people around me. So what do we do? Because obviously if I'm going to move from selfishness to a love that's unselfish, I need to deal with this overinflated ego, whatever size of ego that you might have, because all of us have it. Whether it's on the inferiority side or the superiority side, ultimately it's about us. And it's painful. And we have to deal with this because it's distended, it's inflamed, it's swollen, it's beyond its proper size. And it's no wonder it can be painful, because when this kind of dwells in us, it hurts. And it needs to be treated. Author Timothy Keller talks about this in it's a great book, highly recommend it. It's called The Art of Self-Forgetfulness. And he says, have you ever thought about the fact that you don't notice your body until there's something wrong with it? When you're walking around, you're not normally thinking about how fantastic your toes are or how fantastic your elbow moves, unless you've just had a problem with your toes or you've just had a problem with your elbow. It's only when there's a problem that you begin to notice these things. So he says, could it be the same with our ego? Now, our egos obviously hurt. Is that because something is wrong with them? They're overinflated, they're swollen, they're inflamed. Walking around does not just hurt my toes. I don't notice it unless there's something wrong with them. My ego would not hurt unless there was something terribly wrong with it. Because after all, it's hard, isn't it, to get through a whole day without feeling snubbed or ignored or feeling stupid or getting down on ourselves. It's ultimately because there's something that needs to be dealt with our ego. something wrong with my identity. Never seems happy. So what do? So I've gone through this passage this week. I think it comes down to this. Rather than being puffed up, we allow God's love to fill us up. Rather than being puffed up, we allow God's love to infuse us, to fill up our lives. What we need is more of the love of Jesus, a deeper awareness of his love for us and a growing measure of his love in us to learn to love others in the same way. That because Jesus loves me and because he accepts me, I don't have to earn anything from anyone. I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. I can just enjoy things for the joy of doing them. I can appreciate the skills and abilities in somebody else rather than being threatened by them. I mean, church, don't you want to be the type of person who doesn't need honor and nor is afraid of honor? Someone who does not lust for recognition on the one hand, nor is frightened of it on the other. Would you like to be the type of person who, in your imaginary life, when you're sitting back daydreaming, doesn't dream about the successes that might give you the edge over somebody else? Timothy Keller in his book talks about the Olympian who wins the silver medal. And he says, wouldn't it be wonderful for the silver medalist who, second place, to be thrilled about the successes of the gold medal, the first place athlete, just because they bet that world record time. They did those extra flips or whatever it was, and just be so delighted that somebody at least achieved that. Whether it was you or whether it was them, it doesn't matter because you're just happy at the joy that was achieved. Now you probably say that no one could ever do that. But this is what Paul's saying. That this is what love is about. It's the possibility for you and me. It's what love does. Because it's not about our own ego. It's about just enjoying something because we have already experienced the love of God. And we don't have to do it ourselves. We don't have to prove it to others. We can just enjoy things around us, even if they're not about me. See, this is not just a way of filling up my emptiness or dealing, there is a way of filling up my emptiness and dealing with my overinflated ego. And it's by being filled with the love of Jesus. Real love. This is the love that all of us need. And there is nothing we need more than the love of Jesus. Rather than being puffed up, we allow God's love to fill us up. See, friends, as I grow in my understanding of what Jesus has done for me, I'm learning that he just accepts me for who I am. I'm becoming comfortable in my own skin. I'm learning I don't have to pretend to be someone else. I don't have to envy somebody else. Because Jesus loves me. He made me in a particular way, gave me a particular, weird personality. He gave me particular gifts, and he didn't give me some other gifts. But it's all ultimately up to him. And out of that, my ability to love is able to grow. A while back in my daily time with God, I stumbled upon this phrase in Jesus' prayer in John 17. It just brought tears to my eyes. Jesus says, I've given them the glory that you gave me. Man, I sat back and just thought about that for a long time. So Jesus is praying to his Father, and he's looking at his disciples and saying, Father, you have loved me, and you've given me like all this glory, all this attention, all this love, and I'm giving this glory to them, the same glory that you gave me. Just when Jesus was baptized, you might remember the scene when the Father looks down from heaven and says, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. That's what Jesus says to us. I'm well pleased. I love the fact that you're my brother or sister in Jesus. Now, I'm totally loved. I have everything that Jesus has is now given to me, and the spotlight comes on me from Jesus, and he's pleased with me. And so if there's something I want to boast about, it doesn't have to be something else. It's about God. It's about who he is and what he continues to do in my life. And the same's true for you as well. This is what should fill us up. We don't have to seek to fill ourselves up. See, friends, this is why Jesus was strong enough to be weak. While even though he was God himself and had the highest position, he could actually get down on a knee and take a towel and clean the feet of other people. Nothing was too menial job for him to do. He was secure in who he is and who he was. That's why we can serve in any capacity. We can think about other people, selfless love. If you allow Jesus to fill up your ego in a healthy way, you'll be strong enough to choose roles where you can serve even without any recognition. You might work in a place where you're underappreciated, misunderstood. You might require a whole lot of personal sacrifice, and you're able to do it because you already feel filled up in your life. If you allow Jesus to fill up your ego in a healthy way, you'll be strong enough to use your money to serve other people rather than having to think about all the stuff you still need in your life because you might have something to prove. As if the size of your wallet kind of proves something about yourself. But when you think about others and you're secure in that, you're able to give, you're able to serve. So church, bask in the love of God morning and evening. Just put yourself in a place where you remember how deeply loved you are by the creator of the universe. That there is nothing you can do that causes him to ever love you more, or nothing you can do that ever would cause him to love you less. This is what real love is. Completely unexpected. Because ultimately, real love is unselfish. It does not break community through envy, boasting, pride, dishonoring, or self-seeking behaviors, because love is unselfish. And the very reason we can give such love is because our egos are no longer inflated. Instead, our egos are filled up with this unexpected, unselfish love of our Savior. And so, Jesus, we come to you and we just bask in your love, bask in this completely unexpected, selfless love. That you, Jesus, Son of God, would step down into our planet and you would live as one of us and you would die on our behalf. And you would do all of these things even though you know how bleak and broken our lives are. That there was nothing in us that was worthy of such love, but you put the attention on us. And you loved us, and you still love us, and you will love us for all eternity. And so, Jesus, would you help us to allow your Spirit to fill us up with this incredible, unexpected love every single day. And may the overflow of that help us to love others in the same unexpected, selfless way. We love you, Jesus. We love you, Jesus, because you first loved us. Amen. Amen.